Well, thank you all for coming, and we appreciate you being here.
Speaking to the mic.
We appreciate you all being here. This is the second book launch we've done for Terry here. It's a great venue, and yeah, it was great last time. It's been great this time. Again, I want to thank you all for RSVP and all of you that did, because so many of you did, and it was wonderful. And that's, because you never know when you're planning something, and it helps when they RSVP, and it's encouraging. So thank you all that did, and the ones that didn't, maybe next time. But most of you did, and it was great. Like I said, this is the second book launch. About 15 months ago, we did one last July, a year ago, and it was for Backbeats and Innocence, and it's a great book, and we had great success with that one. And it's just a great little book full of stories that he had written during the pandemic, which was also kind of cool that he wrote them all during the pandemic. And because, I mean, what else did you do? I mean, I think all the rest of it just gained weight, and he wrote a book. So, but he's not much of a slacker, which you'll hear about in a minute. When we came at that time, we hinted that there was going to be another book in the works. Well, it turned out to be 2 books, and I got to tell you, he is the most reluctant person to put his work out there. He does not want to do it. And with a lot of begging, pleading, a little bit of arm wrestling, he finally agreed to do this. And I know that poetry is a little bit different. These are 2 poetry books. They're a little bit different than writing stories. Poetry is more personal. It's more, it's your heart. It's what you feel, what moves you, what matters to you. And they are very good. I happened to find out quite by accident that Terry was a poet, because he had sent me some stuff to proofread. And in the manuscript he sent, there was a page that had 2 poems on it. And I said, I wonder what these are. What does this have to do with the book? So I Googled it, because you Google everything now. And I Googled it thinking, put the first line in, think it would show me who wrote the poem. I couldn't find anything on it. So finally I said, hey, what is this? Is this poem? Is this part of the book? Oh, forget about that. Just forget about that. That's not supposed to be in there. I said, well, it's good. Who wrote it? Me. I said, what? Me. And I said, you wrote this? Yeah. And I said, well, it's really good. He said, yeah, well, just forget about that. So I did for a while, for a few days. And then I went back and I said, hey, do you have any other poems? Have you written other poems? I thought he couldn't really just make a great poem the first time he wrote one, So I said, so I started getting some information on it. And after I asked him a couple of questions, well, about 25 questions because I'm nosy, and he finally told me that he had a whole notebook of poems that he had been writing since he was about 15 years old. And he'd just been sticking them in his notebook and doing nothing with them. And I was like, well, Terry, can I read some of them? No. Please, can I please read some? So he finally let me read some. Then I found out that he'd had a couple of poems that he wrote. He wrote one for y'all, for your wedding. He wrote one for, I think, Brittany. Was Brittany? Did you write one for Brittany? He wrote one for Brittany. He has written poems to his daughters, his wife, and about his grandchildren, about his children going off to college and all that. So he had written some, and he had shared those with them. But the rest of them he really hadn't shared, he hadn't done anything with. And I just thought they were really good. So Terry has a lot of interest. He's into photography. I guess you saw his photography up here. It's all in the gallery here. He's an avid music fan. He sang with the group ASIF. I'm sure you all remember that. Great group.
He did not sing.
Says the lead singer.
He really wanted to
The
sing.
lead vocalist. He did not sing. He played the drums. And he was a self-taught drummer. Moni, I love her. He did not sing. So he was a drummer.
More's the pity.
Self-taught drummer. And he still has, and you can ask his wife about this, they have a room in their house full of his drums. They have their own room. So, yeah. No, they're not sounding. And I have seen a couple of pictures of his grandsons in there playing, and he says, oh, I think Ezra's got rhythm. He's all excited. So he wants to pass that down. So, but he's a great music fan. He collects vinyl records. He's a little frugal about it though, because he won't pay over $2.50 for a vinyl record. But I guess that's smart for money. He also collects books. He's an avid reader. He has a vast collection of books. He loves to go to secondhand bookstores and look for first editions, out of prints, rare books, and just favorite authors. And he just has compiled all these books. So he does that. He's also into woodworking. He makes stuff. And he's a handyman, which I was totally surprised to find out. I would be talking to him, we'd be talking about the book. You know, what do you want to do on this? What do you want to do? What about this one? This one's too long. It's a page and a half. Do you want to go with that one or go with a different one? And he'd be in there, and all of a sudden I hear, "Grrr," and I'd be like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make all that much noise. I'm drilling something. Okay. So he was either, every time we talked, washing, painting, trimming, drilling, cutting, putting out fertilizer, putting stain on furniture. And I'm like, one time he was redoing a door frame or something. I said, "Can't you pay somebody to do this stuff? You're a big executive." And he's like, "Yeah, but I like doing it." Okay. So Terry, for the most part, is a button-down executive. He works for a top of, what is it, a 2014 company. He works for that, and he works hard, and he's achieved great success with that. But the thing with him is he has all these other interests. So he's not a one-trick pony. He does all this other stuff. And I think all of that, you get to see that in his writing, the way he writes, the way he talks about things, the way he describes things. You can tell he's got a lot of life experience. He's also been, he's traveled, he's been a speaker, he teaches, he's gone and taught seminars on how to, what did you teach? How do you do what? Like in business, like to succeed in business. He's done all sorts of stuff. And I mean, he's a certified life coach, which has definitely come in handy for me. And I've learned a lot from him. He's a hard worker. He's very focused. He's very organized. He's very together. He's very complex. He's, I wouldn't say he's tough to work for because he's very patient. But he knows what he wants and how he wants it and how he likes it. But that helps me to do a better job because I know what he's looking for, and that helps me. And so in the process, I've learned a lot from him. He's the reason I'm in this gallery because he encouraged me with my photography. And, you know, so that's been a big blessing to me. But all of these things he's done, Moni said the other day, I saw her the other day, and I said, "You know, sometimes don't you think you should just, like, pick a lane?" I mean, he's just like, and she's like, "Oh, no. Terry is a six-lane highway guy." And I said, you know what? He really is. He really is. But the thing is, he can do it all. He can do it all, and he does it well. Anything he puts himself into, he does well. But now when the poetry came along, I was like, you know, this might make a good book. No, I'm not gonna. I was like, come on, Terry, it'd be a good book. You've got some really good points. No, what will my coworkers think of me? What will my guy friends think of me? And I said, have you ever heard of Walt Whitman? Yeah. Have you ever heard of Robert Frost, Robert Burns, Billy Collins?
Those were all great drummers.
They're still in the line. And then I said, then the golden ticket. I said, and what about that Neil Peart guy? You know, the one that plays for Rush, Neil Peart. I said, you know, what about him? He's a drummer. He wrote songs. He said, Neil Peart. And I said, oh, sorry, you said it wrong. But he did. He wrote a lot of songs. And I said, and what are songs except poetry set to music? So when I appealed to him on that level, he's like, what? So after a while, the one that really got him then was, I don't know if I can say this, I told this to Amanda, when he wrote Backbeats, he said he was writing it so his grandchildren had something to remember him by.
Oh.
And so I said, so if you write this poetry book, now you'll be a writer and a poet. And they can brag about that. That'll be wonderful. And he's like, no, maybe. So after all that, he started pulling together some poems, and we ended up with a book. And that's the reason that book is called Collected Verses is because it is collected verses. He wrote it over 50 years, you know, writing these poems and sticking them in this book. And it is collected verses. And they're beautiful. And the second book is Night Watches. And he intentionally and in a very brilliant way decided to write that book and make it black pages with white writing. And the reason he did that was, one, because of the title, and the title comes from another poem he wrote, and because of what the book's about. The book is all about women and what they feel, what they're afraid of, what makes them scared, what makes them happy, what gives them hope, what crushes them. It's all about women. This guy knows the heart of a woman, like, amazingly, but he's a great girl dad. He's a great father. He's a great husband. He just knows and understands women. And you can see it in this book. You can just see it. And it's a great little book. And the reason it's called Night Watches is because of the poem. The poem was written, and it's about, and I defy any woman in here to say she doesn't do this. When you go to bed at night and you go to rest your head on the pillow and the day is done, you're tired, you're exhausted, and then you start thinking about what your daughter talked to you about, what your son's going through, what's happening with your parents, what's going on with your friend that has cancer. You can't go to sleep, so you end up praying. In the night watches, you pray. So, what are you doing? You're loving them the best way you can in the night. And that's what the whole Night Watches poem is about. And that's where that title came from. And they're both beautiful books, beautifully written. And I hope you get to keep your man card. But
that's two of us.
So anyway, he is a reluctant but very brilliant and talented.
Sorry.
Did I do that? Did you?
No, I did that. Sorry.
Anyway.
Sorry.
Anyway, I give you the poet.
Thank you, Tricia. Well, she didn't exaggerate much. If it weren't for her, these books would not exist because I am a reluctant poet. I'm looking, I hear all my guy friends, and I hope you guys realize I'm still one of you, okay? I want to thank Tricia. I want to thank Trey and Maggie and all the staff at Lupercalia. What a beautiful venue this is. So exciting to have you guys here. My family came from Birmingham. Amanda has been up since 3 this morning. Ashley is going to promise me she'd keep her awake on the way home tonight. I have friends that came from Atlanta. Wow. Got friends that I've seen, so many that I haven't seen in so many years, and I've met new friends tonight. So let me share some things with you. The poet. You need a sound man, Brian. April is National Poets Month. I love that. I love it because my earliest attempt at writing was poetry. That's going to make me nuts. I'm sorry. I've got to fix this. I was trying to sound like Elton John, but whatever. I love it because my earliest attempt at writing was poetry. I was 8 years old, a fresh refugee in the primitive foster care system of the day. I was in a new place with a new family, new surroundings, new school, new everything. I didn't know it then, but I was learning the ropes of what it meant to be a foster kid. It meant reinventing myself every time we moved to a new place. It meant never really knowing who I was to be because I was too busy trying to fit into the expectations that others had of me. Pat Conroy voiced it best, I think. He wrote, "Each year I began my life all over again. I knew no one well, least of all myself. And it damaged me, I think. I grew up not knowing if I was smart or stupid, handsome or ugly, interesting or inspired. I was too busy reacting to the changing landscapes and climates of my life to get a clear picture of myself. I was always leaving behind what I was just about ready to become. I could never catch up with the boy I might have become if I had stayed in one place." Amen to that. I identify with his assessment. As I began to find my way in this new world of foster care and new schools, new friends, new everything, I discovered writing. My second grade teacher, Mrs. Poe, was the one who gave me the keys to this wondrous new place. One of her assignments to us on a lazy afternoon in early summer, circa 1965, changed my life. She asked us to write a poem. I can still see it in my mind's eye. Approximately 20 youngsters grasping a pencil in one chubby hand, 20 innocent heads bowed over 20 old-fashioned desks. You know, the ones with the small table attached to the seat and a small book cubby beneath. The smell of freshly sharpened number 2 pencils hung in the warm air. The light streaming through the windows illuminated dust motes, parachuting to wherever it is that dust motes go. There, under the watchful eye of Mrs. Poe, 20 kids sat wrestling with their first exposure to that wondrous, frustrating, misunderstood, inexplicable, unforgettable thing called poetry. Susan, you get it, right? Got an esteemed poet in the audience here, Susan Ferguson. I'm so glad to have her with us. My first poem was short and to the point. I still remember it. I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning or any of the vast number of honeydews I have on my list, and sometimes I forget the name of my children. Ashley, Amanda. But I remember the poem. If I had a money tree, everybody would like me. But I don't, so they won't. Those 16 words opened a new world for me. Poetry, the rhythm of the words, the magic of the structure, the mystery of finding words that would rhyme and at the same time make sense. All of it appealed to me. Check that. Make that appeals to me, because I still love poetry. As a drummer, the rhythm of the phrases and words resonates with my inner metronome. The challenge of finding the perfect word and the perfect rhyme appeals to the overachiever in me. The flow of the words and the emotion they evoke appeals to the romantic in me. I had my first work published when I was 16 years old. I placed second in the Alabama State Poetry Society annual writing contest. The guy who placed first wrote a little ditty about wine and drinking and such. I never forgave myself for getting second place, and so I determined I would be a better writer. Would you like to hear that guy's poem? I drink my wine, I think my thoughts. The wine I bought, the thoughts are mine. Whenever I think thoughts I shouldn't think, I open the bottle and pour another drink. Wine stimulates the thoughts my mind is thinking. This gives me reason to go on drinking. I place second behind that. People ask me sometimes how they can become a writer. My answer is short and to the point. If you want to be a writer, write. So I wrote. Over time, that led to short stories, essays, more poetry, and ultimately to writing books. I remember clearly how it felt to hold the galley copy of my first hardback. I remember how awkward it felt the first time someone asked me to sign their book. And if we're being honest here, it still feels a little awkward to pen a few words on the title page and sign a book for a perfect stranger. And sometimes it's downright humorous. A while back, I delivered a guest lecture at Auburn University where my daughter teaches. War Eagle. Afterward, one of her students approached me and asked for an autograph for her dad. She excitedly explained that he had all my books and was a big fan. After I signed her book and she left with her treasure, I told my daughter that the poor girl was confused and maybe thought I was Stephen King or something. And I hoped her dad wasn't too disappointed when she handed over the book signed by someone he'd never heard of. Through all the other writing, I kept penning poems. I keep a small leather journal of words and phrases that resonate with me, and sometimes they find their way into a poem. Poetry covering all sorts of topics winds up in my little notebook, and iambic pentameter and rhymes rule. But gradually, prose began to creep into my work. It didn't rhyme. There was a unique rhythm to each piece. Each word stood on its own, not so dependent on its surrounding family of verbs and nouns and adjectives. Each phrase was more powerful. There was less punctuation, and in some cases, none at all. Lowercase font rule. March was National Women's Month, and in celebration of that, I began a series of short prose pieces, little vignettes, if you will, that ultimately became the book Night Watches. We'll hear a couple of those pieces tonight. Now, I know some of my buddies from my days of weightlifting and martial arts just threw up a little bit and are even now calling me for me to surrender my man card. Trust me, guys, I get it. But the words come, and I am just the scribe. One day, when my journey here is done, my children and grandchildren will perhaps find the reams of doodles and notes and scraps of prose, and look at one another and say, he was a poet. Send back beats. I've often fancied myself a poet after a fashion. Of rhyme and iambic pentameter, God gave an ample ration. So hereafter feature some of my themes, featuring assorted topics and strange rhyme schemes. So I have 2 daughters, have 2 grandsons, and I love to watch kids experience the world. Maybe you know that experience. And I wrote this when my girls were small. It's called A Child. Is anyone immune to the smile of a child, to the unfettered warmth, the trust undefiled? Is there a soul left untouched by the joy in the eyes from a newfound discovery, a momentous surprise? I think not. For in the room wherein our true selves are found, safe from the clatter in which our innocence was downed, a common thread, no matter how slender, binds us to the joy of that smile so tender. Maybe you've been in a relationship and things didn't go as well as you wished, and you were maybe lamenting that, and you were looking back and you were thinking about the loss. That's what this poem is about. It's called Angel Wings. Over these years, my heart has grown shutters, like wooden cataracts over windowed eyes. They keep out the light and keep in the pain. And I wonder if you're still kind after all this time. But you found where I live and come around now and again to pry at these windows shuttered by your stain. And I have mastered the art of mime. I've battened down the hatches and I'm safe and secure here inside these prison walls with a spirit tightly leashed. And I've added more bars to atone for my crime. There remains a gaping wound, a hole in my soul. At night I hear the winds whistle through it with a lonely sound. And I marvel at the extent of this treacherous rhyme. While I was looking for a place to stand, you were looking for your wings, never knowing they were renegades with a will all their own. And I think you've profited much from the flight. The angel from which those wings were borrowed is now up and about, and she is looking for a more docile set to bear you on your way. And I suppose you've not yet taken your last flight. When you feel battered from your collision with the world, understand the angel left me grounded with a quiver of words and a memory far-ranging. And it is your litany I recite. This is called An Audience of One. I speak words into the air, creating something from the nothing there. The words bleed out until they're done for my audience of one. My angel of redemption, white witch of good intention, spreads grace where there once was none. She's my audience of one. She shudders the past away, it no longer has a say, opens her heart to the sun, this lovely audience of one. A pattern of feint and thrust gives way to a voice of trust, a warrior who need not run, this powerful audience of one. Scars she's earned from battles past rest easy on her flesh at last. Old memories she's learned to shun, my victorious audience of one. So I work for AT&T. I've been there a long, long time. And we are the acronym king. And we are the kings of being politically correct in our speaking. Techno-speak rules. And one day I just sort of got tired of all of it. And so I wrote a poem called Big Words.
Yeah, elbow move for the last poll?
Thanks, Dale. It's a high-velocity air circulator, but it used to be a fan. He's now a sanitation engineer. Used to be the garbage man. Now there's adequate risk management, where we once were just insured. It's a politically correct and crazy techno-speak world into which we've all been lured. Now he's an account executive. Used to be just in sales. It's a correctional facility. Trey? No longer just a jail. He's the president and CEO. Used to be the boss. He's celebrating negative equity, since it doesn't sound like a loss. He's a senior financial consultant, and not just some old guy selling stock. Sorry, Nathan. Somebody get him a tissue for that nosebleed. It's alternative music these days, not just some guys who can't play decent rock. She's really a fashion advisor. Don't think she's selling clothes. Let's be sure we get it right. We don't want to step on any toes. Whatever happened to the real names of things? Why can't we be happy with just a syllable or two? What is this preoccupation with the status big words can bring? Why can't that let me be me and you be you? Brian, you can buy an integrated audio-visual system, but don't look for a stereo. Though it may be called aesthetically challenging. It's really ugly, don't you know? We all have associates, our colleagues, but there's a shortage on true friends. And isn't it nice? We're no longer aimless. We just have goals with open ends. We're economically disadvantaged. Thank God we aren't poor. Because we're now called specialists, the big picture can be ignored. Our husbands and fathers have been dislocated. That means they're out of work. And with interactive communications, who needs people? We all know that they're all jerks. Whatever happened to the real essence of life? Where did the simple things go? Maybe it's these big words that give us such strife. Or maybe they're a metaphorical symbolism for the failure to adhere to mannerisms with which we've equipped ourselves in order to more perfectly align our lifestyles with progressive flight from known associations in the urban flow. Maybe you've been in a friendship and, again, things didn't go the way you hoped, and for whatever reasons, you drifted apart for a while. But it's the kind of friendship that when you come back together, it's like you saw each other yesterday. I got lots of you guys in this room that I feel that way about. I played with a band for 12 years, and we broke up. And that was tough. That was tough. Thankfully, we didn't know it was our last job because I don't think I could have borne it. By the way, guys, with the 40-year anniversary of the record's coming up, I'm thinking reunion tour. Brian, you got your chops? Jerry, Mo, are there? Okay. This is called Disband. Those we thought we'd die for, we found we can live without. But the love survives the void, and it awakens overjoyed from the periodic drought. The essence of each is now made manifest in all. Your thoughts become my own, companions unseen but known, a silent protecting wall. Memories tend to dim, emotions lose their edge. Fading imagery, longer gaps, recollections losing snap. Years become a powered wedge. Distance provides perspective. Proximity blurs the view. Clarity smeared by time. Rhythms broken, a loss of rhyme. Time to reposition and review. The purity of friendship one can never replace. Simple gifts better by far. those who have been where we are truest reflections of our face. Perhaps the things we died for have left us without that which we wished to avoid. An idea with which we toyed changed what we are all about. But the love survived the void, and it awakens overjoyed from the periodic drought. Move on, Dale. So a word about night watches. Thank you. To build on what Trish said earlier, these are vignettes. They're very small pieces of prose. For the most part, they don't rhyme. And after I read them, I'm going to pause for a second with your permission and let you just ponder for a minute. Okay? I hope that you'll see yourself not only in the other poetry, but also in these. She cries because her past is ugly, never realizing it is her past that sculpted her deepest beauty. Her dreams sustained her until they inspired her and ultimately defined her. Her soul bears the fresh tattoo of betrayal, and then ink is permanent, baby, let me tell you. Her beauty is not just the surface for the uncommitted to enjoy. It is a deep stain of grace. She's dealt with the past as best she could and woven it into a tapestry of cautious optimism and dreams. Her children call her blessed as they examine the fingerprints she left on their soul. There's a lot of different kinds of poems in here. Some of them are happy. There are poems about worship. There are poems about domestic abuse. There are poems about relationships. Some of this was very difficult to write. Some of it is very difficult to read. She doesn't understand why he doesn't understand that the bedroom begins in the living room and kitchen. And the most intimate touch starts with opening the door for her. She kneels to clean the blood from the floor. Blood that until 1 minute ago flowed peacefully through her veins, but was freshly liberated by his fury. She's the most lovely thing he's ever seen, every scar a beauty mark, because her beauty was sketched with a brush of adversity. For all of my artist friends who are here, she is creative and urgent. Her art tattoos her soul and moves her in ways that she does not fully understand. She only knows that she must finish. 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 He deposits the dark rhythm of his words upon her skin, and she feels them there, trying to work their way into her heart. She has a lover whose words are blades, who loves with his fists, and she dreads his embrace and the sound of his voice and his footsteps on the stairs and his key in the lock, and the feel of his hands. And she journaled. Her pen captured her heart in the beauty of immaculate sentences. Verbs and nouns and adjectives leaked on the page in the stain of blotted ink. It kept her secrets safely tucked between pages until her anxious heart demanded a greater safety, and thus she committed them to the flame. Conversations with her are part art, part prayer, part elegy, part nightmare, and altogether amazing. He walks the footpaths, a madman among the tombs of her past, and marvels at the demons she slew and buried where they fell. She embraces the rhythms of her ancient faith, saying, "The darkest nights give the brightest stars." A few years ago, I had a lot of decisions I needed to make, and so I took a few days off, and I actually came to Fairhope. We were living in Birmingham at the time. And I brought my bicycle down, and I spent a few days riding the coast along the bay. And every morning I would get up and have breakfast. I wrote about that in the short story Fairhope and Backbeats. And one of my favorite places in Fairhope is Mayday Park. You guys may be familiar. And I was at Mayday when I wrote this. It's called Faces in the Water. I'm alone, but I'm not lonely, caught up in the night's refrain. I'm quiet, but I'm not silent. I hear music in the rain. I'm riding the pinnacle of the year, the lady crested today at noon. I've learned that not all truth is logic, and not all tides are birth of the moon. The pier is unchanged and stoic, witness to so many winter walks, silent keeper of embraces long past, curator of secret talks. There is magic around the edges, a quicksilver patina painted by the moon. And there walks the master of the obvious, reading meaning from the patterned runes. There are faces in the water, seen through cracks in the weathered boards. Hear the chanted caveat they offer. Not all dragons are slain with swords. I feel you wrapped around me, a shroud tattered by dreams now fled, spotted and stained, tattoos left, branded by the memories I bled. Yet I pull the threadbare remnant close around me still, and caress the mystical fabric woven from things I used to feel. Slowly I remove this garment and toss it into the sea. Sinking, it covers the faces and silences their warning plea. I turn to make my way back home, shoulders hunched against the cold, carrying with me unsaid goodbyes and secrets never told. Fall. Fall is fast approaching. I can sense it in the air. The greening things maturing, the blooming things despair. The meridian is coming. I feel a change in the wind to learn what the future holds and relive the past again. The footpaths I've run have brought me to here and now. The highway of heartache I've driven etched roads upon my brow. But a new destiny is waiting. Its birth now is pending. A new map freshly inked for a road never ending. When my daughters were born, maybe you have kids, you know that magic the first time you hold them. This is called first look. You regard me steadily with obsidian eyes. And I wonder what goes on in that tiny head. In my love for you, no boundary lies. Nothing exists I'd not endure in your stead. As you birthed, I was there to embrace your tiny form and accept the grasp of little fingers perfectly made. The smallest soul, part of myself reborn, a part of God's creation, destined never to fade. So quick to learn, so small and alert. Not for long will life's mysteries remain dark and deep. And that realization brings a deeper hurt. For I've heard it said that babies don't keep. Hang with me, we're almost done. Night watches. She prays for me in the night watches. She loves me in every way she can. She soothes my anxious spirit and calls me her beautiful man. She is gentle and wise and deep. She's my best and biggest fan. She knows where my wounds are and binds them and calls me her beautiful man. She is lovely and ever tender, in this love she never planned. She fills my soul with her morning song and calls me her beautiful man. There was a time when we were not. That time will never be again. Our journey will travel together, my love and her beautiful man. Where's Jerry Timothy? There he is. Joe's the first guy to hear this one. I interrupted him at work one day. He's like, dude, I'm in the middle of an audit. What's up? I'm like, forget an audit. I got a poem, man. He's a loner who's rarely alone, a leader being led. He's a spy whose cover's been blown, a book that's yet to be read. He's a chameleon on a leaded glass, a thinker seeking thoughts. He's a prisoner on a weekend pass, a teacher being taught. His need of roots makes him roam, thrust from darkness into light. He is a visitor to his home, a blind man teaching sight. He's a poet who is wordless, a cynic who believes. He's a judge without a judgment, a jester who grieves. His understanding is unlimited, though his compassion tends to fade. His capacity for love diminished, his edge of direction is frayed. A hunter among the hunted, a performer among the throng, a striver among the stunted, a paradigm of right and wrong. He's been where he's going before he arrives. He's never at a time. His goals have a focus sharpened by drive. His motives have reason and rhyme. A logical man in an emotional state, a perfectionist in haste, an impatient man learning to wait, a promise laid to waste. A single-minded man in a three-dimensional world, a jester who grieves. This is called When the Moon is Full. I think of you when the moon is full, pregnant with her cargo of light. The memories slip their traces and run roughshod over me, carving a beaten path for all to see, leaving me bloodied and breathless in the grip of night. Part elegy, part nightmare, this clinging dream, baptized in my past. I rise from the depths of slumber like a swimmer surface bound, clawing and thrashing, my spirit tightly wound. A sojourner to the nightland, there my lot is cast. Long since painted shut are the windows of my dreams. They open now only with great effort and care. It stings me like shards of rain as I see you standing there. Though all else is lost, the longing remains, it seems. Your touch is ever gentle, yet the time is ever brief for you to impart your healing to my lost and damaged heart. Let your spirit cover me and do its healing part, bearing a ministry of restitution like a penitent thief. like a shaman who talked too much and made the magic disappear, a rogue progeny dispensing a theology of despair, a rhythmic melody he wrote but never shared, listening for music he sings but cannot yet hear. In stillness, the charlatan whispers a rhyme of age, its colors now grown saturate and dark, its passion now become a desperate spark, the tension of opposites now fully engaged. Once again the moon is full, painting the land with acres of light, ripples of silence ringed with evanescent fire, scrivened lines around the heat of desire, luminous, her razor clarity cuts through the night. Can I read to you about Halloween? When I was a kid, Halloween was a pretty big deal. Our costumes were homemade and we carried brown paper sacks to stash our loot. Some of the houses in the neighborhood handed out freshly baked cookies and brownies and such. Some of them gave out great candy like Hershey bars. Although, to be completely honest, I have to tell you there were a few cheapskates that gave out hard candy. And just to clear up any confusion, there was a direct correlation to the kind of candy you gave out and the chances of your house getting rolled. By the time Halloween rolled around, summer had pretty much given up her fight, and the evenings were cool. But we wore short sleeves anyway because we worked up a sweat running from house to house. Then, as now, some folks turned off their front porch lights and chose not to participate in the festivities. Didn't bother us a bit. We still walked to the door and yelled, "Trick or treat!" in our loudest voice. Sometimes we stayed there a few minutes, banging on the door and yelling at the top of our lungs just to make a point. What kind of killjoy doesn't participate in Halloween? I mean, seriously. The night always started with a meeting on the corner of Cadillac and Farnell in the front yard of Gail's house. They had the best yard in the neighborhood for the football games that seemed to form up pretty much every fall afternoon. Dee, me, and sometimes Rusty and Johnny met there as the sun was starting her downward trek toward the horizon. As the shadows grew and the afternoon took on that golden light that is unique to southern afternoons, we laid out our plan of attack, which always included a costume change and a second run through the neighborhood. As the late afternoon waned into dusk, we waited anxiously for the streetlights to flicker on. Normally, that meant it was time to head home for dinner and a bath, but not on this night. This night was special. As soon as the streetlights came on, we began our initial foray. We were armed with rumors about who would have the best candy and goodies this year, and we made a beeline to those houses first. To the victor go the spoils, right? After the first pass through the neighborhood, we found a quiet place under a street lamp and examined our take. Had to be careful during that time because your buddies would try to steal your loot. We always posted a lookout. You can never be too careful where chocolate is concerned. Those were innocent days. But I grew up, and like many of you, I sort of lost touch with Halloween. But when my daughters came along, I rediscovered the joy of trick-or-treating. My girls wore costumes that were usually homemade, but not in the same way ours were as kids. Back then, we made liberal use of cardboard, markers, and if we could get our hands on it, face paint. The costumes worn by my kids were more often than not hand-stitched by their mom. Over the years, they were princesses, ballerinas, the latest Disney character. All of these outfits hung in their closet at one time or another. As for me, I always dressed as a business guy with a suit and tie. Save time. Come home from work, I'm already dressed for the night's festivities. I remember the first trick-or-treat after we moved to Birmingham. We hadn't lived there long, and the girls were adjusting to the new school and new friends. They were still young enough to enjoy Halloween, and I looked forward to walking them around the new neighborhood on the big night. We dressed in our costumes, grabbed our flashlights and plastic pumpkin candy pails, and headed out. It was a perfect fall week. The sound of the neighborhood kids running and screaming took me back to those nights of my childhood so long ago. Nights that were in many ways So many ways, just like this night. The crisp air was redolent of the dry, whispered scent of leaves, sacrificed to the changing of the season. They crunched underfoot like tiny skeletons as we walked, puffing the last of their essence in shades of brown, gold, and red dust that clung to our shoes. The moon was out in full parade dress, a bloated orange face hanging just above the horizon. Its mellow glance added its own mystical illumination to the dusk, already pinpricked with dozens of tiny points of light from flashlights clutched in costumed fingers. Stars blazed overhead as though jealous of the freedom evidenced by the erratic movement of the pinlights below. There were screams which seemed to be coming from a house just up the hill, and in a minute I saw the cause of the ruckus. The world's smallest ballerina, a hippie with no discernible body hair, and a 3-foot Frankenstein ran screaming, each in a different direction, and running behind them was a bellowing creature in a black mask. The mask covered the face and came partway down the torso of this apparition. The rest of the torso was covered by a tattered t-shirt, spotted with sweat and other stains better left unexamined. The lower extremities of this beast were covered with a pair of jeans that petered out in a series of irregular strips just below the knee. And in its hands, the creature carried a large plastic axe. It was Mr. Freddy from down the street. Satisfied that he had given the three a fright that would last them until the next Halloween, the specter retreated to his porch, hiding once again among the tall bushes that stood sentinel around the perimeter. He waited for his next victim. The muted sounds of laughter mingled with distant screams, wove a tapestry of sound that erased 40 years in an instant. Suddenly, I was back in the old neighborhood, running with Dee and Johnny and Mike, racing to the next house, vowing to get the biggest brownie or the last Hershey bar or the pack of gum that would almost certainly contain that Mickey Mantle card I needed to complete my collection. Running with the air cool on my face, confident in a future that I couldn't see but hoped in nonetheless. Surrounded by friends that measured you, not by how much money you earned or what kind of car you drove, but by the fact that you were you. The candy and treats were great, but the real magic of those long ago Halloween evenings was hanging with your buddies. You didn't know it then, but there were memories being forged on the anvil of those crisp autumn nights, memories that would surface over and over in the years to come, bearing their freight of smiles. There's one time in particular that sticks in my mind. I remember our plan for that year. It was presented to us in great detail by our friend Rusty. It was designed to give us even more candy. Doubling our take is how Rusty had put it. Following the plan, we dressed up in our handmade costumes and completed the first round of the neighborhood. Flush with candy, cookies, and other treats that were sure to start fights with our little brothers and sisters, we went to our secret hideout where we had carefully stashed the loot. Once that was done, in accordance with the plan, we swapped costumes. Dee put on Rusty's, Rusty put on mine, and so on. It didn't occur to us until later that as far as the folks handing out candy were concerned, these were the very same three costumes that had already shown up once on their front porch on this faintly chilly All Saints' Eve. The wise folks passing out candy at the door could spot a grift a mile away. The truth of that finally dawned on us about the same time that old Mrs. Sawyer chased us off her front porch with a broom that had seen so much action its straw was worn nearly to the laces. The end was curved into a wicked talon from years of sweeping the driveway. It looked like the kind of broom that a witch would have trouble getting airborne. And if she did, it would only fly in circles. And colorful language she surely did not learn in Sunday school. Mrs. Sawyer promised various forms of bodily harm if she saw us creeping around again. Running from the house, we headed for safer ground. As soon as we were free from the threat of the broom, we stopped, breathing heavily, with sweat caught in our crew cuts like jewels of dew. Some of it trickled down our freckled foreheads into our eyes. Dee turned to Rusty, said, "Great idea, Brainless. She nearly killed us with that broom." He grabbed Rusty in a headlock and proceeded to give him an Indian burn, rubbing his knuckles back and forth on Rusty's crew cut. Laughing, we pulled Dee off Rusty and helped them both to their feet. "Come on, let's go see what else we can get," said Rusty. "Maybe no one else will notice that we've already been there." And with that said, we set off again. Halfway down the street, we came to the old Hutchcroft place. It was dark except for a single dim bulb that burned at the top of the stairs leading to the front door. The yard was wild and overgrown. When we rode our bikes, we had to veer off the sidewalk that ran in front of the Hutchcroft place because bushes grew through the chain link fence surrounding the front yard. The branches covered most of the sidewalk, casting it in a dark shadow that somehow looked ominous and cave-like even in the middle of a summer day. We stood at the end of the driveway, looking at each other. We'd skipped this house on our first foray through the neighborhood, but found ourselves drawn back now. There were all sorts of rumors about the Hutchcrofts. Rumors that their house was haunted. Rumors they were crazy. Vicious rumors that they were Auburn fans. You know, crazy, scary, nutso stuff. Love you, sweetie. I should tell you at this point that I am an Alabama fan. And, well, so when Amanda went to school there, and ultimately she began to teach there, so in Iron Bowl, I look something like this. When I look at my scores, I go. One year, the old missus, well into her 70s, passed out candy stark naked. There was a line of kids down the driveway eager to get a peek. The year before, it was rumored that they gave out $1 bills. Mr. Hutchcroft worked as a printer, and he had supposedly cashed his paycheck, telling the bank teller to give it to him all in ones. He took the stack of $1 bills back to his print shop and had them bound together with that sticky red stuff on one end, sort of like a notepad. When a kid rang the doorbell, he answered the door, fully clothed, thankfully, and peeled a crisp new $1 bill off the stack and handed it to the surprised ghoul or princess. A whole $1. The possibilities were endless. We wondered if he would do that again this year. The little general convenience store down at the footpath at the end of the woods was a fine place to spend $1, and we spent the days leading up to Halloween walking up and down the aisles, dreaming up shopping lists that were all funded by a hoped-for $1 from the Hutchcrofts. But alas, it was not to be. Turned out that the old couple were handing out hard candy. And they were both fully clothed. It was like a double whammy. We watched as the old missus dropped the peppermints into our bags. Here you go, that's 1, 2, 3 pieces for you, and you, and you. The candy landed in the mostly empty bags with a soft thump and rattled around down there as though to rub it in that this year's take included no chocolate, no brownies, no naked old ladies, and worst of all, no $1. It's a hard old world sometimes. You know, in a world where sugar-laced goodies are readily available and even pass for nutritious food, I wonder if kids look forward to Halloween these days with the same breathless anticipation that we did. I hope so, because of the memories. All right.
So I remember being in 7th grade, and my literature teacher said, you know, it's a really special moment when you get to hear a poet read their own work. So that was really cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. And so, like my mom was saying, you know, you're kind of reluctant to share this stuff, so we appreciate your vulnerability. And, you know, I think that takes a pretty good sized man card to do that.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
question, you spent this time in your life in the corporate world. What made you turn to writing?
So it's a great question. All right. So I wrote my first poem when I was 8. I won my first writing contest when I was 14. I had to read my writing on the NBC Morning News, right? It was one of these live things. And then when I was 16, as I mentioned, I won my first poetry contest. And so I guess I was a creative guy before I was a business guy. So I graduated from South Alabama, go Jags, and majored in business. And my study partner for my accounting classes was a young lady from mainland China named Karina Pang. And one night we were studying in her kitchen, as we often did, and she said, "I'll be back soon, Terry." So she gets up and leaves, and in a couple of minutes I hear this most amazing piano music. Like, whoa, I thought she put on a CD, and I'm going to ask her, who is that? So she's gone, and she's gone, and she's gone. So eventually I get up and go looking for her. Well, I walked into the next room, and there she has a baby grand piano set up in her dining room or whatever. And she's wailing. Man, she is going nuts. And I just stood transfixed for a few moments. And finally, when she finished the piece, I'm like, Karina, why are you studying accounting? You should be studying music. And she said, Terry-san. She always called me Terry-san. Terry-san, mother teach music very good for soul, but accounting very good for belly. So, roundabout answer to say that the real answer is, I lived in a foster home when I was in the 8th grade, and the guy was a CPA. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my major, but I thought if I get a major in accounting, this guy will give me a job, right? Well, I did, and he didn't. And the rest, as they say, is history. But good question, thank you. Yes?
Are you going to write for your grandchildren also?
Am I going to write for my grandchildren? Yes, I am. I dedicated Backbeats to Ezra and Jude, and I'm sure that I will write stories for them as well. That's a rare gift for a grandparent to be able to write to their children. My kids always say, "What do you want for Christmas, Dad?" And my answer is invariably the same. I'd like a letter from you. And so my kids give me letters for Christmas, and I in turn give them letters. And I'm sure that I will continue that with my grandkids.